The world is filled with mysteries, ancient, hidden, forgotten. Across the vast expanse of time, there have been civilizations that rose to unimaginable heights of power, knowledge, and wealth. Yet, for all their greatness, something happened to each of them that led to their ultimate downfall. The cities vanished, the people disappeared, and the ruins that remain stand as silent sentinels, guarding their secrets. No explanations, no answers, just questions that linger in the air, unanswered and unsettling. Some say these places are cursed. Others claim they were simply abandoned, the result of natural disaster or war. But those who have dared to venture into these forsaken lands, those brave enough to uncover the truth, often find themselves drawn into something far darker, something that cannot be explained by history or logic. It is as though these lost civilizations were never meant to be found, their dark pasts guarding the most terrifying of truths. But what if the cities were not abandoned? What if they were left for a reason? The thrill of discovery can be a double-edged sword. Every ancient artifact uncovered, every forgotten ruin unearthed, brings us closer to the answers we crave. But with each answer comes a question that leads to more, until the boundary between the living and the dead blurs, and you find yourself caught in a web of horror and mystery that may never let you leave. In the shadows of ancient pyramids, beneath the overgrown jungle canopies, and deep within the forgotten depths of long-lost cities, the stories of these cursed places wait. They are silent now, but not for long. If you listen closely, you may hear their whispers calling. For those who dare to explore their secrets, there is no turning back. The lost civilization of the Anasazi. The sun set behind the jagged cliffs of the American Southwest, casting long, dark shadows over the desolate land where the Anasazi, once a thriving civilization, had vanished without a trace. Their ruins remain scattered across the harsh, wind-battered desert like the remnants of a forgotten nightmare. Their disappearance, as baffling as it is terrifying, still haunts the land. The Anasazi were skilled builders, creating sprawling cliff dwellings that hugged the sheer rock faces of canyon walls. These ancient structures, still standing against time, seem to whisper with the ghosts of the past. Their multi-story complexes, some with up to 200 rooms, were architectural marvels. Yet as impressive as they were, a growing sense of unease surrounds these sites. It was in the late 19th century when explorers and archaeologists began to piece together fragments of their history. The Anasazi had lived in harmony with the land, thriving for hundreds of years. But as they flourished, they became consumed by something darker, a force perhaps ancient and malevolent that seemed to follow them. One evening, a group of early settlers approached a cliff dwelling hidden deep within the canyon, their lanterns flickering as they moved cautiously. They described a feeling of being watched, an overwhelming pressure that weighed heavily on their chests, as if the land itself was alive, hungry. They dared not go further, retreating as the wind began to howl, carrying with it a sound like whispers just out of reach. Then came the unexplainable disappearances. A team of archaeologists ventured into the ruins, eager to uncover the truth. They had been warned by locals, but their skepticism overruled their fear. The ruins were not as they expected. Some of the chambers were unnaturally cold, the walls marked with strange symbols, symbols that seemed to pulse as though alive. As they ventured deeper into the heart of the cliff dwellings, the atmosphere grew thick, suffocating. One night, after returning from a particularly long day of excavation, the team noticed something peculiar. The symbols that had been carved into the walls earlier were different. They had shifted, subtly but undeniably. Words began to emerge from the markings, words no one could comprehend. The night was silent save for the occasional creaking of the ancient wood, but something else stirred in the stillness. The following morning, Two of the archaeologists were gone. Their tents, their tools, everything had vanished as if swept away by an unseen hand. Panic set in, but the others decided to continue their work, hoping to uncover whatever secret had driven their colleagues away. It was then that the whispers began in earnest. At first they were soft, like a breeze stirring the leaves. But then the whispers grew louder, more insistent, louder than the wind itself. They echoed within the stone chambers, reverberating in their skulls, a cacophony of voices that no one could quite understand. The team could feel the presence of something ancient, something wrong lingering in the air. Fear spread like wildfire through the group, but it was the eerie silence that followed that struck terror into their hearts. One archaeologist, desperate to understand, ventured deeper into the canyon, alone. He returned hours later, his face pale, his eyes wide and bloodshot. He claimed he had found something buried deep beneath the earth. There, in a hidden cave, was an altar so old it seemed to hum with a dark energy. Around it were piles of bones, thousands of them, arranged in a grotesque circle. On the altar lay a book, its pages cracked and yellowed, bound in what appeared to be human skin. The archaeologist's journal, found days later, was incoherent. Pages were torn, the handwriting erratic, as if something had overtaken his mind. The last entry, however, was chilling in its simplicity. They never left. Over time, more disappearances occurred. And then, something even stranger. The land began to claim the bodies of those who ventured too close to the ruins. Explorers would return from their journeys, but there would be no sign of the others who had joined them. It was as if they had been swallowed by the earth. The final nail in the coffin came when a lone researcher, braving the desert heat and knowing the risks, made a final trip to the cliff dwellings. He had read the stories, heard the rumors, but he was driven by a single obsession: to find out what had happened to the Anasazi. He made his way to the cave that the previous archaeologist had described. His breath came in shallow gasps, and the ground seemed to vibrate beneath his feet. The whispers filled the air once again, louder now, more insistent, as if begging him to stop. But he pressed on, his curiosity overpowering his fear. Inside the cave, the altar stood before him, surrounded by the skeletal remains of hundreds, maybe thousands of those who had come before him. The book, bound in human skin, lay open on the altar. His hand trembled as he reached for it. The moment his fingers brushed the pages, the ground beneath him trembled violently. The whispers crescendoed into a deafening scream, and the cave seemed to close in on him. Then, there was nothing. His body was found days later, his eyes wide with terror, his mouth frozen in a scream. But the most horrifying part of it all? His body was found in the same position as the others, prostrate, staring into the abyss, as if something had stolen his soul. The truth remains buried beneath the rocks, hidden by the wind and the sands. The Anasazi vanished, but the land remembers, and it waits, patiently, for the next curious soul who dares to uncover its secrets. The vanishing of the Maya. For centuries, the once thriving Maya civilization stood as a beacon of mystery, its cities filled with temples, pyramids, and advanced astronomical knowledge. Tikal, the heart of their civilization, was the pride of the Maya world, a city with towering structures, intricate carvings, and a culture that seemed destined to last forever. But something went wrong. The ancient city of Tikal, after flourishing for centuries, suddenly fell silent. The stories of the Maya's sudden disappearance still send chills down the spine of any scholar or archaeologist brave enough to study them. In the year 1848, a team of explorers set foot in Tikal, determined to uncover its secrets. Among them was Dr. Richard Marsh, a renowned archaeologist, eager to study the civilization's advanced understanding of astronomy. His crew of 4 others, each with their own specialized skill, were ready to embark on a journey into the unknown. The city seemed to greet them with eerie silence, the towering pyramids and grand plazas covered in thick vines and moss. There was no sign of life, just the sounds of the wind and the occasional rustling of leaves. The strange thing was, there was no sign of decay either. The stone temples looked pristine, untouched by the hands of time, their carvings as fresh as if they had been made only the day before. As the team ventured deeper into the heart of the city, something started to feel off. The air was thick with an oppressive weight, and strange shadows danced at the edge of their vision. As they made their way to the largest pyramid in the city, they noticed that the carvings on the stone, depictions of gods and kings, seemed to shift when they weren't looking directly at them. The eyes of the stone faces followed them, regardless of where they stood. Dr. Marsh tried to brush off the unease creeping over him, but the hairs on the back of his neck stood on end. His compass, which had been perfectly reliable in the jungle, began to spin wildly in his hand, and the sun, high above, seemed to dim as though something was blocking it from view. By nightfall, the crew had set up camp near the foot of the Great Pyramid. The temperature had dropped dramatically, and the air had turned still, as if the jungle itself was holding its breath. As they sat around their campfire, Dr. Marsh began to feel an inexplicable pull toward the pyramid summit. He insisted on climbing it alone, despite the warnings of his team. With a lantern in hand, he ascended the stone steps. As he reached the top, he was struck by the eerie silence that now enveloped the city below. But what he saw on the horizon froze him to the core. A swirling mass of black clouds, moving against the wind, forming a shape that seemed to resemble a face. A great rumbling sound filled the air, the clouds moving closer as if being summoned. At that moment he felt it, the unmistakable sense that he was not alone. As he turned, a figure stood before him, tall, humanoid, but with eyes that gleamed like liquid silver. The figure reached out to him, its touch cold as death itself. Before he could scream, the ground beneath him trembled violently, and everything went black. His crew found him the next morning, his body lying at the base of the pyramid, his eyes wide open in terror. There was no sign of the mysterious figure. The camp was gone, everything packed up as if they had never been there. But the ruins of Tikal remained, silent and empty. The team left the ruins, but as they departed, they could hear the whispers, faint and distant, like a language lost to time, carried on the wind. The Maya had vanished, but their curse remained, haunting the place where once they thrived. The curse of the Olmec, the stone faces that watch. The Olmec civilization, known for its colossal stone heads, is one of the most enigmatic and mysterious of the ancient world. These massive stone faces, some weighing as much as 40 tons, are believed to represent their rulers. But there's something sinister about them, something that has made scholars and archaeologists uneasy for centuries. In 1972, a team of archaeologists led by Dr. Henry Mitchell ventured deep into the jungles of southern Mexico. Their goal was to uncover the secrets of the Olmec civilization and study their intricate art and architecture. Little did they know that their expedition would uncover a dark, ancient curse, one that had been waiting for centuries to be unleashed. The team was led to a remote site where the Olmec stone heads had been uncovered, hidden deep within the jungle. As they approached the site, Dr. Mitchell couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The air was thick with humidity, but also with an eerie, oppressive weight. The jungle was silent. No birds, no insects, just a heavy stillness that filled the air. As they reached the stone heads, the team marveled at their size and intricate details, but there was something unsettling about them. The faces, while seemingly serene, had an unnatural, almost predatory quality to them, as if they were watching the team from behind their stone eyes. The moment Dr. Mitchell laid his hand on one of the stone heads, the ground beneath them trembled. A low rumbling echoed through the jungle, and the trees seemed to sway as if moved by an unseen force. The sky darkened, and the air grew cold. One by one, members of the team began to experience strange, unsettling visions. Rachel, the photographer, saw the faces of the stoneheads moving, their eyes following her every move. Thomas, the linguist, heard whispers in an ancient language he couldn't understand. And as the rumblings grew louder, they realized they were not alone. Out of the shadows, figures began to emerge, dark, skeletal figures that seemed to rise from the ground itself. Their eyes glowed with an otherworldly light, and their forms flickered like shadows. They moved in silence, closing in on the team. Panic spread like wildfire. Dr. Mitchell grabbed Rachel's arm, pulling her toward the exit, but as they ran, the stone heads seemed to shift and loom larger, their eyes now filled with hunger. It was as though the stones themselves had come alive, their ancient curse being unleashed upon the explorers. As the team tried to flee, the jungle seemed to close in on them. The trees shifted and twisted, as if the very land itself was trying to trap them. The ground cracked open, and from beneath the earth more skeletal figures emerged, their bony hands reaching out to claim the trespassers. One by one, the team vanished, swallowed by the darkness and the curse of the Olmec. Only Dr. Mitchell remained, standing frozen in fear, his eyes locked on the stone heads that watched him. And then, as the last flicker of light from his lantern faded, he was gone. Weeks later, a rescue team found the site, but there were no bodies, no traces of the team. The stone heads remained, their gazes unblinking, their curse still waiting, still watching. The forgotten city of Madol. In the heart of the Pacific Ocean lies an island shrouded in mystery, a place where ancient ruins rise from the sea like the crumbling bones of a forgotten civilization. This is Madol, a sprawling city once home to the mysterious Sodalur dynasty. Built on a series of artificial islands connected by canals, Madol was a place of power, mysticism, and ancient rituals. But today, it is a ghost town, its stone structures slowly being consumed by the ocean, leaving behind only whispers of what was once. In 1983, a team of archaeologists led by Dr. Linda Harper set out to investigate the ruins of Madol. Their goal was to uncover the truth behind the city's sudden abandonment, which had occurred sometime in the 17th century. They had heard the stories of strange happenings on the island, whispers of shadowy figures, unnatural sounds, and the feeling of being watched. Some said the spirits of the Sodalur had never left, and that the city's curse was real. Dr. Harper was a seasoned archaeologist, known for her methodical approach to excavation and her skepticism of local legends. She dismissed the rumors of ghosts and curses as superstition, but even she couldn't deny the eerie atmosphere that seemed to cling to Madol. The ancient city, with its towering basalt walls and labyrinthine canals, felt oppressive, like something was waiting just beyond the reach of sight. The team arrived on the island by boat, the sun sinking below the horizon as they made their way toward the ruins. As they set foot on the island, the air grew heavy with a sense of foreboding. The wind had died down, and the only sound was the distant crash of waves against the shoreline. The trees around them seemed unnaturally still, as if even nature itself was holding its breath. Their first night on the island was uneventful, but as the team settled into their campsite, a deep sense of unease began to take root. It wasn't long before they realized that the ruins of Madol were more than just a city. They were a labyrinth. The stone structures, which appeared to be simple on the surface, were intricately designed, with narrow passageways that twisted in on themselves. Some of the buildings had been constructed with stones so large that even modern machinery would struggle to move them, leaving the team in awe of the ancient builders' skill. Dr. Harper and her team spent the next few days exploring the ruins, but each day they felt a growing sense of dread. At night, they would hear strange sounds, distant murmurs, whispers, and what sounded like footsteps in the sand. One night, as they sat around the campfire, Dr. Harper heard a voice, a low, guttural whisper coming from the darkness beyond the firelight. "Leave this place." She froze, her heart pounding in her chest. At first, she thought it was one of her team members playing a prank, but when she turned to look, everyone was accounted for, sitting in silence, their faces pale with fear. The next day, as they ventured deeper into the heart of Madol, they found something that would change everything. Tucked away in the ruins of one of the larger structures, Dr. Harper uncovered a hidden chamber. Inside, the walls were covered with strange symbols, symbols that didn't belong to any known language or culture. Some of the symbols appeared to glow faintly in the dim light of their torches, as though they were alive, pulsing with an ancient energy. But the most chilling discovery was a large stone altar, positioned in the center of the room. It was covered in a thick layer of dust, and the air around it felt cold, unnaturally so, as if the room itself was holding its breath. As Dr. Harper stepped closer to the altar, she noticed something she hadn't seen before, a faint outline of a figure, carved into the stone, its eyes hollow and staring directly at her. That night, as the team made camp near the ruins, the strange noises returned, louder than ever. There were footsteps, soft at first, then growing louder and closer, as if someone or something was walking around their camp. The wind picked up, howling through the trees, and the ground beneath their tents seemed to tremble. Rachel, one of the team members, was the first to go missing. Her screams echoed through the camp, piercing the night air. Dr. Harper and the others rushed to the source of the sound, but they found nothing. No sign of Rachel, no trace of her struggle. It was as if she had vanished into thin air. In the days that followed, the team grew more and more desperate. Strange things began to happen. The once pristine ruins now seemed to shift and change when they weren't looking. Pathways that had been clear in the morning were suddenly blocked by fallen stones. The symbols on the walls of the chambers began to shift, changing shape and meaning, and always there was the sense that something was watching them, something waiting in the shadows, just beyond the reach of the light. Dr. Harper began to have vivid dreams, dreams of the Sodalur people, their faces twisted in agony, their eyes wide with terror. She saw the stone altar again, the figure carved into it now alive, its hollow eyes staring at her, pleading for release. Then, one night, as they were preparing to leave the island, the ground trembled violently, and a deep rumbling sound filled the air. The ocean seemed to rise up, the waves crashing against the stone walls of the city with unnatural force. And then, from the heart of Madol, came a voice that echoed in their minds, whispering in a language they couldn't understand. "Leave, or join us." The team scrambled to pack their things and leave the island, but it was too late. As they made their way toward the boat, the sky above them darkened, and a thick fog rolled in, swallowing the island whole. The sounds of whispers grew louder, and the air became thick with the scent of salt water and decay. When they finally made it back to the boat, Dr. Harper glanced back at the island. The ruins of Madol stood in the distance, silent and still. But as she looked closer, she saw them, figures standing at the edge of the ruins, their hollow eyes fixed on her, watching her with an intensity that sent a chill down her spine. The boat sped away from the island, but the images of those stone faces haunted her for the rest of her life. She would never speak of what happened on Madol again, but she knew that the city's curse was not merely a legend, It was real, and the spirits of the Saudeleur, those ancient watchers, still waiting for the next unsuspecting soul to cross their path. The silent shadows of Teotihuacan, deep in the heart of Mexico, amidst the arid lands of the Basin of Mexico, lies the ancient city of Teotihuacan, a place that has fascinated archaeologists and historians for centuries. Known for its massive pyramids, the Pyramid of the Sun and the Pyramid of the Moon, Teotihuacan was once one of the largest and most influential cities in Mesoamerica. Yet, like many other great civilizations, it too mysteriously fell into ruin. One of the most unnerving aspects of its demise is the complete absence of records about its collapse. No written documents, no records from survivors, only abandoned buildings, empty streets, and the echoes of lost lives. In 1989, a group of 6 archaeologists led by Dr. Samuel Gray set out to investigate the remnants of Teotihuacan. Their mission was simple: to uncover the secrets of this long-abandoned metropolis and shed light on what had truly led to its downfall. Dr. Gray, a seasoned archaeologist with a reputation for uncovering the truth, dismissed the folklore that surrounded the place, the local legends of eerie shadows, unexplained noises, and mysterious figures seen in the corners of the pyramids. As a man of logic, he believed the disappearance of the Teotihuacanos could be attributed to natural causes, perhaps even a sudden climate change or internal social collapse. As they arrived at the city, the scale of the sight took their breath away. The Pyramid of the Sun stood in front of them, a massive, towering structure that loomed over the landscape. The air was dry, and the sun beat down mercilessly, but there was something oppressive about the atmosphere that made the team uneasy. The city, despite its ruins, seemed to hold its breath, as if it were watching them. "We'll start with the Pyramid of the Sun," Dr. Gray announced. "There's a belief that the center of this city holds the key to everything. Let's find what remains hidden." The team began their exploration, but from the moment they stepped onto the grounds, something was wrong. The shadows around the city were unusually dark, even in the full light of day. The weather was unnaturally still, as if time had slowed within the walls of the ancient city. They had all heard the warnings. The locals spoke of a curse, of restless spirits roaming the ruins. But they had laughed it off, dismissing it as superstition. As the team ascended the Pyramid of the Sun, strange things began to happen. Dr. Gray's compass began to malfunction, spinning wildly in his hand, as if something magnetic was present beneath their feet. The air felt thick with tension, and the further they climbed, the more oppressive it became. By the time they reached the summit, Dr. Gray could feel his pulse quicken, his breath shallow. It wasn't just the altitude. There was something else, something darker at play. "We'll make camp here for the night," he said, trying to shake off the feeling of unease that had settled over him. As night fell, the temperature dropped drastically, and the shadows in the city seemed to lengthen. The team huddled around their campfire near the pyramid, speaking in hushed tones. The wind had died, leaving a suffocating silence in its wake. Then, at the edge of the firelight, they saw it, a shadow, dark and elongated, moving just beyond their sight. "Did you see that?" whispered Maria, one of the archaeologists, her voice barely audible. Before anyone could respond, the sound of footsteps, soft but unmistakable, echoed through the ruins. The sound was too rhythmic to be from an animal. Dr. Gray stood up, his eyes scanning the darkness. "Just the wind or animals," he said, though his voice lacked conviction. But the footsteps continued, getting closer with every passing second. The team fell silent, their eyes wide with fear. The air around them grew heavier, colder, as if something was moving just beyond the limits of the firelight, something ancient and sinister. Suddenly the sound stopped. Dead silence. Then, in the distance, a single scream tore through the night. A woman's scream, filled with terror, echoing across the ruins. The team leapt to their feet, their hearts pounding in their chests. They grabbed their flashlights, shining them toward the sound, but saw nothing. Only the dark silhouette of the pyramid of the moon in the distance, looming ominously against the starless sky. I don't think we're alone," whispered Edward, the youngest member of the team. His face was pale, his body shaking. Dr. Gray, unwilling to admit fear but unable to shake the growing unease, motioned for the team to follow him. "We need to investigate. There could be someone else out here." They moved toward the source of the scream, but the deeper they ventured into the heart of Teotihuacan, the stranger things became. The structures around them seemed to warp, their angles bending in impossible ways. The path they had followed earlier seemed to vanish, replaced by an endless maze of stone and darkness. They were lost. As they stumbled through the labyrinth of ancient buildings, they came upon a large temple at the center of the city. The stone steps leading up to the structure were covered in a strange, slick substance, almost like black tar, but it gave off an unnatural glow. When Dr. Gray reached out to touch it, a chilling wind gusted through the air, and the substance seemed to pulse under his fingers, as if it were alive. It's alive," Dr. Gray whispered in disbelief. "We need to leave. Now." But as they turned to leave, the shadowy figures appeared, emerging from the darkness as if they had been waiting for them. Tall, cloaked figures with faces obscured by hoods, their eyes glowing faintly in the darkness. The figures didn't move toward them, but instead circled around the team, watching, waiting. "Run!" screamed Maria, her voice trembling with fear, but her words were drowned out by a deafening, otherworldly hum that seemed to come from the very stones of the city. The team ran, panic setting in as the figures closed in on them, their footsteps heavy and slow, but inexorable. The maze of the city seemed to stretch on endlessly, the streets twisting and turning as though designed to keep them trapped within. One by one, the team members began to disappear. First Edward, then Maria. Their screams were cut short, and the shadows consumed them whole. Dr. Gray, heart pounding in terror, led the remaining team members toward the Pyramid of the Sun, hoping for an escape. But when they reached the summit, they found the figures standing there, waiting for them. "You cannot escape," a voice boomed, though no one moved their lips. The voice was not from the figures. It came from the stone itself, a deep, ancient voice that seemed to echo from the depths of the earth. In that moment, Dr. Gray realized the truth. Teotihuacan was not just a city. It was a prison. A place where the souls of the ancient Teotihuacanos had been trapped, their restless spirits bound to the stones, eternally guarding their city. And now, they had come for him. When the rescue team arrived days later, they found no trace of Dr. Gray or his team. Their camp was abandoned, the fire still smoldering. Only the ruins of Teotihuacan remained, the pyramids standing silent against the horizon. But if you listen closely, you might hear it, the faint sound of footsteps in the distance, echoing across the stones, waiting for the next group of curious souls to arrive.